Let's go to Richard, who has this question. Can the UK really support 5 large leftist parties? Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, the SNP, and Party McPartyface, or whatever the Corbyn Sultana Party will be called. They really need to name that party because we're just struggling every time we talk about it.
I think a name is coming.
Yeah.
I think in the next month there will be a name.
Okay, thank goodness. Okay. Surely the vote can't be split that much in a first-past-the-post system. I also wonder who donates enough money to maintain a central office, pay staff, etc. Is it likely that one or more of the big trade unions will break with Labour to pay for one or more of these parties? Sorry, it's loads of questions in one. Well, don't apologise, Richard, because we love this topic at the New Statesman. And we have spoken recently, actually, on the podcast that we did analysing the Caerphilly result about what it means for Labour if it's not the obvious stop reform party in whatever seat. Who do you vote for if you want to stop reform? Tactical voting becomes really difficult when there's not an obvious challenger, and you could get a choice of Labour, Greens, Lib Dems, your party, as we call them in-house at the New Statesman at the moment, in some of these seats, which are leaning more towards left alternatives.
Yeah, and unfortunately the voting system does just reward geographical concentration.
Yeah.
If you have 1 million voters and they're all concentrated in a handful of seats, you will win those handful of seats. If you have 1 million voters concentrated across the entire country, you won't win any at all. So really it's a big question for the left in terms of, is it dividing its vote too much across? I imagine there will be some consolidation. I can't foresee a future where your party and the Greens coexist. I think given all the issues your party has had, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they fold into the Greens at some point in the future. And then if you look at one of the reasons why the SNP was always so successful, even though it didn't have a massive vote share in terms of the entire British vote, is because it was concentrated in Scotland, and so it could win a lot of seats. At the same time, one of the struggles that UKIP had for years is that it could never really win that many seats, despite having a lot of people sort of voting for it in little pockets around the country. Yeah. So it is a major question, basically, about can you one of the problems with your party is that they could get sort of North Korean levels of support in North Islington. That doesn't mean that you're going to win anywhere else,
Yeah, and also, some of these parties have different functions. So the Lib Dems essentially are the party for soft Tory voters in southern, home counties, commuter belt seats, really. I mean, sorry, that's very crass analysis of it, but those are the seats that it was targeting at the last election. You had Ed Davey knocking down the blue wall physically in one of his stunts. So they know that that's their kind of audience. And so
it's the Gales belt, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what they're
Gales
talking
belt.
About. If you've got a Gales in your area, you're likely to go Lib Dem.
I love that theory, yeah. And so, that's their function, even if you see them as a left party. Corbyn's party could be more of a force in, urban seats, London, Birmingham, those kind of places.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to know because in a perfect world where you could perfectly move progressive votes around the country, there are more than enough progressive votes to win the next general election and then to have a coalition. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for people to realise that. I think what you saw with Caerphilly was a consolidation in kind of the last week of Labour voters realising, due to polling, due to the amount of attention, due to how clued in they were to what was going on, that Plaid were the people to consolidate around. And so they did that. It's much harder on a big national picture for people to have the information, to know who they should consolidate around, to get that sort of really close local polling on who you should be voting for in your constituency if you want to keep that candidate out. There are tools that will do this. One of the issues for Labour is that they have a long-standing policy that, if you were a Labour member and you were to say, vote Green, you could be expelled from the party, even if what you're actually saying is vote Green to keep out reform in this area where the Greens could win. Labour, I can't imagine ever changing that. Yeah. Because they're too afraid of the implications for that, particularly if they go into the next election and it's not very clear if they'll have enough seats across the country to be the leader of that progressive coalition.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, voters don't generally like being told who to vote for, do they? Which has always been why a progressive alliance has never quite manifested officially. There might be gentlemen's agreements on the ground in certain races, but there's never been this, you should vote Lib Dem here to get the Tories out here, because voters in the end want to make up their own minds and don't like this idea of just being pawns in a game of politics.
Exactly. And in a perfect democracy, everyone would say exactly how they what they feel, vote for who they wanted, and then your parliament will just reflect the national picture of what people want.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen on the first past the post, and it can't happen. So people just do have to be tactical about who they're voting for. And I think, a lot of people in Caerphilly were essentially changing their votes at the last minute because, they're actually a unionist, so they were suddenly a Labour voter who was going to reform, who would never normally have done that, or they're not a unionist, but they view reform as so bad that they are willing to move their vote as well. So I think it was kind of a situation where people were holding their noses and jumping for where they need to jump to.
Yeah.
But it did help. There was a massive vote turnout. There was a lot of attention. People were really paying attention to what was going on in Caerphilly.
Yeah. And there was another part of this question, which was about the potential for a trade union to break with Labour and start backing one of these other parties. I don't know what you think of that. I mean, none of them are sort of born of the Labour movement like Labour was. I know organised labour is less of a, influential force in modern Britain today, but there are those old ties, aren't there?
They're very old ties. And while it might not be as an influential force in Britain, it's still a very influential force in Labour.
Yeah.
They're still a source of a lot of Labour's funding. A lot of Labour politicians have come through the trade union movement. I mean, a very famous example is Angela Rayner, who was, I believe, a shop steward and then went from there to being a Labour politician. So you do have that really time-honoured tradition of people coming from the unions, going into Labour and becoming a part of the movement. With Unite, I think it's very interesting. I think there is a likelihood they've threatened about disaffiliation. They've threatened about moving away. They've moved how they fund, so they're funding candidates rather than the central party. I don't know if in a world where your party had been a real success, really well organised, was polling the way the Greens are polling.
And was led by Jeremy Corbyn.
Had a clear leader, clear policy. I know, a dream world. A world maybe where he would have won in 2019 if those conditions were the same. I could have seen Unite doing that, definitely. I don't see that happening now.